What's going on, guys? Keegan here from Punisher's Paintball. I'm here, as always, with Doug. Today, we're bringing you kind of a beginner video, and we're going to be explaining the difference between compressed air and CO2.
So, if you want to pick up either of these tanks after you're done watching the video, the link is available in the description. Please make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube and find us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll catch you after the intro. Alright guys, so a very common question as people are getting into paintball is, why would I spend more money to have a compressed air tank when a CO2 tank is, what, this is $29.95?
Yeah.
So 30 bucks for this versus about 45 for a beginner compressed air tank. But what they don't see is the long term and how one is just safer, more efficient. So today we'd love to dive into that. So I think first, Keegan, we can dive into what tank structures and just what they're made of. Yeah?
Yeah, so the actual material that they're both made out of are the same. They're both going to be aluminum. However, the kind of one of the two big differences between them is the fact that with a compressed air tank, you're going to have a regulator system on it versus a CO2 tank, you are not going to. The CO2 tank, you're measuring it off of weight, you're filling it off of weight. And so can it be as accurate? Yes, but most of the time, not so much. It also doesn't have any regulation going into your actual gun. Mm-hmm. And so it's just however much pressure is coming out, that's what's coming out.
That's what you got us to go off.
Yeah, versus a regulator on a compressed air tank. You're going to have your gauge that's going to show you how much is in it. So this is like a 3,000 tank, so you can fill it to the 3. You also have burst discs that'll blow. One being if you have too much pressure in the tank, one will blow, and one if you have too much pressure coming out of the tank, it'll blow. And that's just to prevent your actual marker or tank from being damaged. You can regulate the output that's actually going into your tank. So for something like this, it's going to be around that 800 PSI going into your actual gun. So that's one of the big two differences between the two and why compressed air tanks in the long run are going to be better.
Better for your gear overall because, and as you get into more expensive compressed air tanks, you can actually control and regulate down the amount of pressure that goes into your gun. Helps your solenoid, helps a lot of things going forward. But keeping with the theme of just why compressed air versus CO2, temperature I believe also really will kind of play a factor because since CO2 is liquid, what is it? If it is colder, you'll end up with, I think, more liquid, and if it's warmer, you'll end up with more actual CO2 gas in the tank, like usable gas.
I don't know.
I believe that's roughly how it goes. When it's hotter, things will evaporate, right? Turn into more of a gas. So it can really vary the amount of efficiency that you'll get out of a CO2 tank as opposed to with a compressed air tank that's going to be very consistent from use to use, especially and from fill to fill. So another really big point on why to use compressed air over CO2, air is just air. It's a lot cleaner. CO2 puts moisture and just a lot of dirt and other filth into your marker's system. So that's going to be a lot more cleaning for you. That'll wreck your O-rings because they're constantly getting wet and getting colder and then getting warmer again. A lot more chance for things to go wrong inside of your gun. And then also, if you are someone who would want to use an electronic marker at any point in time, you really can't be using CO2 because, again, that is moisture. You're going to end up messing with the electronics and probably frying your board trying to use CO2. So again, like for just starting out, CO2 is probably okay if you're just using a Tipman or something cheap like that, but you will have a better experience overall and you will be able to purchase more guns without having to buy a new tank off the bat if you start with a compressed air tank.
Like Doug said, it's cleaner, but it's also safer. CO2 can be very dangerous. To fill, it can be very dangerous. If you drop the tanks wrong, it can be very dangerous. And so CO2 comes in pretty much a big aluminum container that's probably about 5 foot something. And if you drop one of those, it will go through a few walls if it hits wrong. If you hit the nipple off, the pressure from it is just going to blow that thing through the walls. Mm-hmm. It's overall for your gun, it's safer as well as just for you safer. It's also going to be cheaper because Compressed air, I mean, you can just throw it on a compressor versus actually having to get the liquid nitrogen
For CO2.
For CO2. So overall, easier, safer for compressed air over CO2.
Right, and to speak on Keegan's comment of cheaper, of course, the upfront cost, yes, it's going to be more to get the tank initially, but over time, it's going to be less to actually get it filled, to maintain it. And I mean, a lot of fields that you go to, they'll have like an all-day like pass for air. Some don't even care to make you pay for air. So I mean, like it. Also, CO2 is just kind of being phased out at a lot of fields. They're not really servicing it anymore. So CO2, I think, is kind of a dying thing.
Yeah.
So while the tank is cheaper up front, the long-term benefits, I really would not recommend it. We do carry it here at Punishers. If this is still the way you want to go, you can find them online, but really might not recommend that for the long term.
So kind of a few things to wrap up, just like key points to say. CO2, can you use it on an electronic marker?
No.
No, definitely not. Can you throw a compressed air regulator onto your CO2 tank? Not to my knowledge, and I would not recommend doing it.
I wouldn't try that.
Can you fill your CO2 tank with compressed air? I do not recommend doing that at all. And if you decide to, it's not on us. I would never recommend someone do that.
Do not.
As they are designed specifically for CO2 and compressed air. So those are kind of a few wrapping up things. Overall, I will always recommend compressed air to someone over CO2. However, if you're old school and would prefer to go with CO2, they do still make it, and you can find, like, we don't actually fill CO2, but like welding shops or something like that, if you took it to them, they possibly might.
That's probably your best bet. So guys, if you like this video, please let us know in the comments. Give us any other ideas too, if you're just getting into paintball and things you'd want to see. Again, if you'd like to pick up either of these tanks, we have links below in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll catch you next time.